Feels good to have Death Battle back after all the uncertainty earlier this year. Someone must have made a goated wish on the Dragon Balls for the show to thrive. They're coming back with a bang, with Omni-Man from the amazing Digital Think Mark versus Bardock from the series that has Dr. Wheelo in it. A match I've expressed as my preferred for Nolan over Homelander in the past. And then Death Battle hit us with the why not both. So, how was it? Did they come out of the gate swinging with their first independently produced episode? Is it better than Omni-Man's other episodes? Well, that was a high bar to clear, so let's see. Starting with the analyses, I am so glad that these are able to feel fresh and distinct from the series' other outings on the show. Dragon Ball gets used a lot, and Nolan just got an episode 2 years ago, so these could have so easily felt stale. But Nolan's manages to make the most of the new material and updated public perception of the character to approach his analysis in an entirely different way, albeit still keeping light on comic exclusive spoilers. His first rundown is primarily focused on season 1 of Invincible, and they hardly reach past that at all, except for the one time they reached a little farther than was necessary. Ironically enough, this new one doesn't go quite as far in the timeline, but it does focus more on the post-season 1 stuff. His new family, the start of his redemption, and his realization of the value of life. It picks up where the last one left off. I think it's great stuff, all interwoven very well with a much more in-depth stat side of things. Not in a way that's inherently better or worse, mind you. They want to avoid spoiling more than is necessary in both episodes at different points in time, so I think their different approaches work similarly well. I'd still say the first rundown is a little funnier to me and has my favourite individual line about how Omni-Man's attempts to turn his son into a Viltrumite ironically got turned around on him and Mark made him human. Round 2 though does have its own banger jokes, primarily the callback to its own why Omni-Man, how Omni-Man bit, and I like that leads into the final line of the analysis being Godspeed Omni-Man. The lack of a cutaway also means that they don't need to adjust the pacing to accommodate one and everything gets to flow a lot better. I do hope they get to come back eventually, but I'm definitely not heartbroken at not every single episode needing to have them. And the Versus side of things got to capture my interest much more. They brought up feats and calcs that were completely new information to me, so it was a fun learning experience. Not that Versus Homelander going less in depth was a flaw, because good god, he's already dead, leave him alone. It just meant they didn't have to reveal much of their hand until now, and I think that was for the best. And Bardock, despite being the dozenth or so Dragon Ball character the show has used, still managed to stand out from the rest. It came at a cost though. There was a universe-sized hole in the script that'll leave it feeling forever incomplete. I think I missed the shockwaves. Okay, but no, I'm glad we got to focus on a different part of the series for once without needing to disguise it with window dressing like what Frieza's episode tried to do. The attack potency stuff was about what I expected, but the speed caught me very off guard. I didn't expect Bardock's speed to scale that high or for it to surpass Nolan's. The cool thing about this episode is that it's a rare case where I hadn't heard any kind of consensus going in, so I didn't know who to expect to win. Which character was stronger and by how much would depend on who I asked. The one constant across it all was Nolan being the faster of the two. Then this comes out and turns that on its head. I thought that was cool, it made the fight less predictable and even caught me more off guard when Nolan ended up winning. I'm also aware that it's a controversial verdict, and if you're hoping I'll join the mob in tearing the episode apart for that, then hi, you must be new here. Just to make it clear, the debate is probably the aspect of these episodes that matters to me the least. I don't have strong enough opinions on where these characters, quote, should be scaled. And even if I did, I'm not gonna get up in arms about it because I don't care all that much about them having a different opinion. If you want to complain about the stats they gave, this will not be where you find your audience. Take it elsewhere. With that clarified, I like Bardock's rundown. He's a character I tend to like less the more the series tries to bring him back and expand on him. Goated wish for his sons to thrive and all that, which I'm very glad the episode only nudges towards without vocally mentioning. I also promised a friend of mine that I would keep bringing it up in this review, but I only wrote it in the script twice, whoops. But Bardock is ultimately a character I like, and the episode manages to actually cover the Super Saiyan thing in an engaging way, going over how he had similar experiences leading up to the form as Goku did, and how it served as an indication of what might have been was a perspective on it I've never heard before, so that was nice. The difference between his and Vegeta's control of the Great Ape was also something I'd never even thought of before. So that is yet another Dragon Ball Death Battle that introduces me to a more interesting bit of trivia than anything in Gogeta vs Vegeta. And across both analyses, the editing is among the show's best. I'd say this is the biggest improvement compared to Nolan's first episodes. That one's editing is really good, but the truly standout motion graphics are much more sparse in comparison. DJ and Max were setting the bar even higher from the previews alone. When we got the culling of Viltrum presented like this, that's how I knew, oh, we're back. You can tell I like these rundowns because I've waffled for this long and we are not even at the fight yet. Though it isn't one where I have a ton to say about it relative to some other episodes. A lot of the action's on the simpler side, though not without stuff to praise about it. I like how the conclusion is able to be conveyed through the relative advantages each character has in the animation. Bardock is portrayed as much faster, dodging Nolan's surprise attack even when he has to jump on him, blitzing around him as the Great Ape, and doing so even more once he goes Super Saiyan. He's always the one landing the most hits. Not that they do too much though, because Nolan's able to tough through them all until the very end, not showing any signs of visible damage until the Super Saiyan onslaught. Meanwhile, any major attacks he lands on Bardock tend to be much more effective. He's the first to draw blood, the big punch he's able to land after tossing the pod almost takes Bardock out there and then. Even the Great Ape isn't able to level the playing field since Nolan's able to break free of its grip and stagger it in a single blow. Then when he tries to do the So Long Gay Bowser, he spins him with so much force that the tail rips off immediately. It's only once Bardock goes Super Saiyan that he's really able to level the playing field to any meaningful extent, and even then he loses the final direct punch clash. Nolan's other advantages also get to be shown off during those interactions. Even though Bardock holds the speed advantage over him from the beginning, he's able to use the pod as a means of creating a diversion to keep him in one place and land the hit he needs, showing off his greater experience and tactical thinking. And even when Super Saiyan Bardock is able to start doing some damage, he can only maintain it for so long before it drains his stamina and he fizzles out. All of this is with great animation and sound design. The combat's fast and fluid, the sound design lets everything have the impact it needs, and while the first set piece on Thraxa doesn't stand out much to me, I love the beautiful blue glow the star gives the ending in space. The voice actors are giving it their all too. I was super happy to see Tom Schultz get to reprise his role as Omni-Man, giving a very different kind of performance. Against Homelander, he never really had to exert himself much because, I mean, of course he didn't. Here though, the screams when tossing that final energy blast and throwing that last punch prove that Tom can sell both sides of Nolan just as well. Cameron Nakad's Bardock stands on a similar level. All the Dragon Ball shouts are delivered with all the intensity I could want. The actual lines we're given to say are also good, though I wouldn't say any of this dialogue is going to stick with me to quite the same extent as Omnilander's did. Every line from that fight has been seared into my brain for years, whereas here, mainly Nolan's lines just don't hit quite as hard. Stuff like "you're an embarrassment" and "am I supposed to be impressed" are good and in character, but they just don't quite have that same punch as "are you going to cry" as a taunt. That's not to say nothing stuck with me though. Nolan remarking how Bardock is as in over his head challenging him as Mark was, only for Bardock to snap back saying that his sons would kick Mark's ass is great. Cameron's delivery has this perfect level of aggression and animosity, and I love that because of when in the timeline this takes place, the mention of sons plural means that he likely is also including Kakarot in that statement, the newborn with a power level of 2, so the insult is even more devastating than Nolan realizes. Also, it's a fun play on the "my dad can beat up your dad" thing now being "my son can beat up your son." Nolan's line about how whatever you are, you're an embarrassment might not be the most riveting on its own, but it does lead into a pair of interactions that I really like. Bardock's reply works, saying that he'll show him the power of a Saiyan. His pride is going to make him want to prove his species. One of my friends mentioned how the scene was framed in a way that made him think they were going to do the meme, which didn't even cross my mind before then. I guess they just didn't have an appetite for Think Mark that day. And then at the end, when Nolan refers to him as a Saiyan since he doesn't know Bardock's name, Bardock uses his dying words to make sure Nolan doesn't forget it. That's a cool continuation, I like it. There's also the reworking of Goku's "I will not let you destroy my world" line. A cool way to show that Bardock's concern when facing death is leaving his family and race behind, since he does care about them when push comes to shove. And again, Cameron knocks the vocal delivery out of the park. Though the first 3 times I heard it, I thought he said wife instead of worlds. Please let me know in the comments if you did as well. I need to prove to my friends that I'm not going senile. Some of them heard the same that I did. We've got to be onto something. Admittedly, there are definite improvements that could have been made to the scenes surrounding it. Bardock is the only Super Saiyan on the show who can ascend on command. Unless you want to be a smartass with Broly, but don't. He's got to unlock the form at this point in the timeline. And I do really like the idea of him transforming when he's on his last legs and the Great Ape already failed. The way it's done though didn't quite hit me to the same extent that I think Mark they were intending. The way it is right now, Nolan flies Bardock up to the star and then stops to choke him instead of just tossing him in. I think the intent could have maybe been that he didn't want to kill him there and then, which is why his quirky little fuck at the end might be him showing remorse at taking another life. But if that's the case, then why did he even take him up here at all? I mean, I'm glad he did. Again, that star provides some gorgeous lighting and Super Saiyan looks absolutely stunning, but it makes Nolan stopping to let Bardock have his little moment feel a lot more awkward and manufactured. A way it could have worked a little better for me would be to focus more on Nolan dragging him to the star, Bardock seeing it in advance, and then he does the transformation while they're still moving. It's still a solid scene, just one that's a few tweaks away from being really great in my eyes. You know what doesn't need to be tweaked though? The music track. For some reason, they're allergic to giving good names to the songs that accompany the Omni-Man episodes. I can't believe we have two and the better of them is Diabolical Invincible Me. The weird clunky name isn't going to make me like Solid State Invincible any less though. I'm not including it within my ranking of every track, which is planned to be my next upload, but if I did, it would be an easy top 30 contender, maybe even top 20, which doesn't sound that high until you see how stacked the remaining competition it is and how many bangers it already outranks. I expected it to reference Diabolical Invincible Me in some capacity. What I didn't expect for was for this to be an even more direct sequel than Strongest Alive was to Mighty. That one was the passing of the torch down to the next generation. This one's more reflective of the same character's arc in the lyrics. Instead of looking down on people, saying how they all look the same from so far above them, it has Nolan acknowledge their feelings because Nolan's gained more of an appreciation for life. Instead of talking about seeing their reactions to the pain he causes them, it goes into the shame he feels seeing people who once looked up to him as a hero now seeing him as a monster, and that in his lifetime he could never make up for everything he did for the Viltrum Empire. The instrumental also has a very different feeling, sounding less sinister and more heroic to further reflect how he's changed. Bardock isn't left out completely, of course. Plenty of lyrics about serving an empire and the blood that's left in his hands could also be applied to him, and his theme does get to play over the Great Ape transformation. I think, Mark, this song might be my favourite thing to come from the episode. It's amazing. Also, for some reason, whenever this shows up in one of my auto-generated YouTube music playlists, the very next song, every time without fail, is the Under Pressure cover from Happy Feet 2. I can't even be mad because one, it's a really good cover, and two, I'm basically encouraging it because I let it play out every time anyway. I have nobody to blame but myself. As for stuff I didn't like, what even is there left to go over? Bardock getting hit with his own tail disoriented me a bit since we see it descend from above and then Nolan swipes him with it from below, all with the camera rotating 180 degrees out of nowhere. I guess more damage being caused by Bardock's arrival to justify Nolan's immediate instinct to beat the shit out of him would have been beneficial, but it doesn't tank anything by any means. A couple shots here and there drag on for a little longer than I feel was necessary. I don't especially like Nolan's final line. If they're trying to get across remorse, then that was way too quirky for me to be able to take it seriously. I also feel weird seeing Nolan in 3D, but that's not a fault of Death Battle, just the character being in a style so drastically different to what I'm used to that my brain takes a little bit to adjust. The conclusion was also quite thorough and I liked it. Though judging from the response it got, maybe some of these corner box points would have been better addressed verbally to further try and justify the Sundisk feat, which, to reiterate, I have no stakes in. Argue with the wall, preferably one far away from here. Alright, so that was Omni-Man vs. Bardock, an episode I really liked. The show is indeed back with a bang, and to answer the question of whether this is my preferred Omni-Man episode, no, I wouldn't say so. I also wouldn't say these are directly comparable in most ways since they're going for such drastically different things, but I generally find what Omnilander sets out to do much more interesting. Playing into it being a stomp where Homelander is getting his karmic ass kicking is one of the few scenarios where this kind of thing works. I mean, the official promotional Twitters for both shows were rooting against Homelander in that case. Omni-Man vs. Bardock is longer and has a better back and forth, but it's also a lot more standard outside of, I guess, the size difference during the Great Ape scene, which makes Hulk vs. Godzilla even more irrelevant to me. Versus Homelander also has a much more unique art style that lets it stand out as one of the few hand-drawn episodes and is hitting much higher high points. It has some of my favourite dialogue in this series, with even the weaker lines in it being several steps above anything in vs. Bardock for me. The music track and kill for vs. Homelander are in my respective top 10 lists, and the setup remains uncontested my absolute favourite across all of Death Battle. I don't think, Mark, anything in vs. Bardock quite reaches that level. The only aspects where I'd say I solidly prefer this one are the analysis editing and the better pacing with the lack of cutaway gags. At the end of the day though, me preferring Omnilander is not some damning statement about Omni-Man vs. Bardock. That's still one of my favourite episodes of the show. This didn't need to reach that level to be good, and I'd say it is. The irony is not lost to me, by the way, of both Nolan matches I brought up in that old video getting made, and the one I was trying to offer the alternative for ended up being the one I preferred. Death Battle continues to make me eat my words. Not that I'm bothered by that video continuing to age poorly, because it is very bad. It can eat shit and die as far as I'm concerned, I don't care. This episode turned out great, I loved it. Not to the same extent as some other recent Dragon Ball Death battles like their modern magnum opus and Silver spilling the drink, but again, that bar was so high that I can't exactly call this a disappointment for not surpassing them. It was a very strong showing for their first independent episodes, and I look forward to seeing what's in store for Joker vs Jarno, Bowser vs Eggman, and Evan vs Michael throughout the rest of the year. I'm gonna be scoring this one at a clunky song title out of 10. It's like we never left. And that'll be all for now. This would normally be where I put my reaction highlight reel, but that'll be going on Galactic It Was a Draw Attorney's channel this time around. Whether that changes for any future reviews, we'll just have to wait and see. If you're interested in seeing me and my friends watch this episode for the first time, I'll have it linked in the description if it's out. While you're there, consider checking out GE's own review, as well as Nem's one. Both of those will also be linked in the description. If they're out, that is. I don't know when they're releasing relative to this one. Now, time for me to get back to the track ranking and then my final movie ranking of the year, both of which will likely be at least 45 minutes long. I gotta stop saying I need to do shorter projects, and then forcing more feature-length scripts upon myself. Oh boy.